Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Day 2 of the 2023 NFL Draft, just a handful of hours away. And we'll see which direction the team chooses to go for the rest of this draft very soon. Very exciting. Going to be streaming tonight. Should start at about 4 o'clock p.m. Hope to see you there. But before we turn the page to Day 2, I want to look back at Day 1. And I want to make sure that things are understood. I want to make sure that things are understood with regard to what this team did yesterday and how they made decisions. Because, look, yesterday, both the picks that we made, both of the selections that we made in the first round, Devon Witherspoon and Jackson Smith-Njigba, surprised me. I didn't have either of those guys getting picked by the Seahawks in either of my mocks, or, excuse me, any of my mocks. And I did a lot of them. I never had Witherspoon and I never had JSN. I can admit that. That's an L on my part, sure. I didn't think there would be a lot of interest there. And I can understand that a lot of people were surprised by these picks. And I can understand that with that surprise often comes disappointment. Because if you weren't expecting those picks, then it's hard to really be excited for those picks. I understand that. And I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody that they have to like this pick. I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody that they have to get on board with the way this team is approaching things. However, I'm making this video because I don't think the way some people are trying to frame this is good. I don't think the way that some people are trying to discuss these picks makes sense. And obviously, everyone's entitled to not like these picks if they don't like them. And there are many legitimate reasons to not like them. I don't love them. I don't think they're amazing picks. I don't. I think there are some picks we could have done, some moves we could have made that might have been a little better than this. But there's a difference between not liking the pick, not liking the decisions, and then mischaracterizing the decisions. So I want to take a look at some stuff here to kind of hammer home what I'm saying here, because after yesterday, after those picks were made, there were a lot of people who didn't like the pick or didn't like the picks. In some cases, people didn't like either pick, saying something along the lines of, same old Pete and John, messing up our drafts like they always do, can't help themselves, blah, blah, blah. And here's my thing. The Seahawks might have messed up, but they didn't mess up the old way. They did not make the same old mistakes. Not at all. If you believe that this draft is characterized by the Seahawks doing the same old thing, that's factually incorrect. And I think it's really important to explore that. And I'm not just talking on the surface level. I'm not just talking about the fact that the Seahawks spent a first-round pick on a cornerback when they've never done that. I'm not just talking about the fact that the Seahawks have spent a first-round pick on a receiver when under Carroll and Schneider they've, never done that. Unless you count Jimmy Graham, which you shouldn't. But I'm not just talking about that, although I do think that's significant. It is worth noting that they have done things positionally that they have never done before. They have spent a number 4 overall pick on a cornerback when before this they had barely ever spent a top 100 pick on a cornerback. They spent a top 20 pick on a receiver when they had never used a first round pick on a receiver during the again, Carroll and Schneider era. Of course, that's what we're talking about here. Yes, that is different, but there was also a sentiment being expressed by some people after the pick. Their immediate reaction was, what a reach. Especially after the Witherspoon pick, there was a sentiment of, why did we make this ridiculous reach for a player that is not worth the number 5 overall pick? So there's not liking a player. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with disliking a player or disliking a pick. But then it's another thing entirely to just make things up to try to make the pick look worse. Here's the PFF big board, which was updated right before the draft yesterday. Devon Witherspoon is at 4 overall on their big board. And Jackson Smith-Njigba is at 9. Just to remind everybody, we got Witherspoon at 5 and JSN at 20. So we got 2 guys in the PFF top 10, in the top 9 actually, with top 20 picks. Let's go over to PFN. What does PFN say? Devon Witherspoon, 10th, and Jackson Smith and Ajigba right behind him at 11. So you got two guys in the top 11. Is it a tiny bit of a reach for Witherspoon at 5? Maybe, on this list. But not a big one, not a significant one, not one really worth sweating about. If you like the player, you like the player. Tankathon. What does Tankathon say? Witherspoon, 6th best player in this draft on Tankathon. JSN, 14th. Again, we got him at 20, people, just reminding you. Let's go over to the Draft Network. What do they got? Witherspoon, 8th. 8th best player in this draft on their big board. JSN, 13th. CBS. What does CBS have? Devon Witherspoon at 9 and Jackson Smith Najigba at 19. One of the lowest. And yet still higher than 20. Let's go to Sports Illustrated real quick. What do they got? Devon Witherspoon, 9. JSN. Where do they have JSN? They're one of the only major big boards that has him going up, that has him beneath 20. And they have him at 23. So basically where we got him. So if you are under the impression that either pick was a reach or some sort of weird attempt to address a need or satisfy the desires of the GM, ignoring the team, that's just wrong. You can go to the consensus big board on NFL Mock Draft Database. Witherspoon's at 5 right now. He is at 5. We got him at 5. He is at 5. And JSN's at 11. JSN is at 11th overall. You may not agree with that. You may feel like those guys should be lower on these lists. You guys might feel like, hey, Witherspoon was in the teens and JSN should have been in like the 40s. And you are allowed to believe that. But there is no reason to believe that any of the experts, and with that, any of the professionals, by which I mean the actual NFL front offices, believe that. And if you doubt that, understand that a vast majority of people believe, and the Lions' actions after the Witherspoon pick bear this out. If we did not take Devon Witherspoon at 5, he was going to the Lions at 6. So one way or the other, he was going in the top 6. It just, was it going to be to us or was it going to be to the Lions? So you may not like the pick. You may have wished that we did something else. But Devon Witherspoon is not a reach. He is not some sort of bad value pick. In fact, the value is just about right. And if you doubt this any further, I want you to take a look at the mock draft database page for Devon Witherspoon and look at all these mock drafts posted yesterday, literally yesterday, that have him going in the top 10. Look at all these big boards that have him going 6th. We have one that has him going 8th. 14th is about the furthest down you'll find him. 6, 6, 6, 7, 6, 7. All these 6s. God, I think I'm going to summon Satan. I'm saying 6 so often. 6, 7, 9, 10, 6. Every now and then you find a pick in the teens, like the 16, the 14, the 17. But over and over and over again, he goes 6 overall. One pick below where we got him. So, bottom line is, the value was there. You might not like the pick. Again, I'm going to keep reiterating that because people will misconstrue what I'm saying. You may not like the pick, but the value was clearly appropriate. And that goes double for JSN, even though I wasn't a big fan, and you may not be a big fan. Mock draft after mock draft after mock draft has him going 20, or in some cases, significantly higher. Now, this may end up being a mistake. These picks could easily end up being mistakes. Both of them, Witherspoon and JSN. But what I want to push back on is the belief that we're making the same old mistakes, because that's what I kept seeing in the chat yesterday after the Witherspoon and to a certain extent after the JSN pick. People saying, oh, Carroll and Schneider doing what they always do. They can't help themselves. We can't have a good draft. We had one good draft last year, now back to the same old garbage. Let's look at some of the drafts the Seahawks have had, some of the really bad picks that we've had over the last close to decade now that has made people express things like that, okay? 2016, Germain Ifedi. First round pick. We picked him at 31. If you go to PFF's final big board from 2016, Germain Ifedi is listed as the barely in the top 200. 182nd overall on their final big board. So They thought he was a 6th-round pick, maybe a 5th-round pick at best. We got him in the 1st. By the way, that's just PFF. I know there are some other big boards that are going to have a Fetty higher. There are probably 1 or 2 big boards, like professional big boards you could find that had him closer to the 1st round. But PFF is considered to be one of the most respected NFL sites out there, so I'm just leaning on them for an example. So you reach like crazy for Germain Ifedi, and it comes back and bites you. You end up getting a very mediocre player who doesn't really do that much good for you. Let's go to 2019. Let's go to 2019. The other super disastrous pick under Pete Carroll and John Schneider, LJ Collier. You get him at 29th overall. You go over to PFF's big board from 2019. He's 54. They have him 54th on their big board. So with a late 1st-round pick, we got a player who, according to PFF, should have probably gone sometime in the late 2nd. And I remember doing draft stuff during this time. LJ Collier was, he was not considered to be a 1st-round pick by most places. So you reached. You got somebody where the value was not there. Let's keep going. Jordan Brooks. Another pick that looks like it's going to end up being a disaster. Maybe some people are going to feel a little bit softer on this one because he has had some decent performances. But you pick him 27. You go to the top 100 big board that the PFF had for 2020. He's not listed. They did not have Jordan Brooks in the top 100. He's nowhere on this list. I looked. He's not there. Dwayne Eskridge. A couple years ago. Dwayne Eskridge. We picked him 56th overall, our top pick in that draft. Where was he on the PFF big board? 164th. So that is same old Pete Carroll and John Schneider messing up the draft. That is what characterizes their old drafts. That does not characterize this draft at all. All right? Those were a bunch of picks the Seahawks made where they fell in love with a player and decided, I don't care what it takes, we're going to get that player. And even if we have to reach like crazy, we like this player so much, we're just going to spend way too much draft capital on them just because. And it has pretty universally not worked out. So I just want to make sure things are being characterized properly. What drove these picks, okay? What drove the pick for Dwayne Eskridge? Because we wanted a receiver that could run jet sweeps and fly sweeps for Waldron's offense, and we didn't care that the player was just not that good. What drove the Jordan Brooks selection? Honestly, I don't even really understand this one myself. I still don't get it. You reach for a linebacker when you didn't need a linebacker. Don't ask me about this one. Give me a mulligan here. But LJ Collier, you felt like you needed an edge rusher. You needed a defensive end. So you said, bring me a defensive end at 29. I don't care who it is. I don't care how good he is. Just bring me to him. You ended up with a guy who was a bust even if he was taken in the 3rd round. But you took him in the 1st. These picks are motivated by desperation. You got Germain Ifedi because we need an offensive lineman. We just need an offensive lineman. I don't care who it is. Bring me an offensive lineman. Oh, yeah, go get a guy who should probably be a 4th round or 5th round pick in the 1st round. Yeah, sure, do it. Because that's what we need to push us over the top. The one pick from this era that was a disaster that wasn't like this was Malik McDowell. Malik McDowell, the value was actually fair. If you go to PFF's big board from that year, Malik McDowell is 21st overall. So getting him at 35, the value's there, but what was the problem with Malik McDowell? He was, how should I put this? Can I say an idiot? Is that inappropriate? Can I call him an idiot? Yeah, okay, I'm going to call him an idiot. He was an idiot. He was a character red flag, and those red flags blew up into massive, massive flags before he even played it down for the Seahawks, and he ended up being the very definition of a wasted pick. Are we doing that in this draft? Is that the problem that we're repeating with Malik McDowell? Are we repeating the same old problems? No. If we had done that, that would have been the Jalen Carter pick. And we didn't do that. We had every opportunity to do it, and we clearly, based on our reactions, had zero interest in it. If we were to have reached, if we were to have repeated the mistake of the LJ Collier pick, Jordan Brooks pick, Dwayne Eskridge pick, the Germain Ifedi pick, what would we have probably done in this draft? We would have reached for a position of need, right? We would have, okay, we can't take Jalen Carter because of the character concerns. Let's get Brian Bresee at 5. Let's get Khalija Cansey at 5, which I wouldn't have hated, but clearly it would have been a reach. And we're not doing that. we're taking good value picks. And again, nobody has to like it, but if you're going to try to discuss it and you're going to debate it and you're going to argue it, then you have to contend with facts. And the fact of the matter is, objectively speaking, Devon Witherspoon and Jackson Smith-Njigba are good value where we picked them. Appropriate value. In fact, I would even call it above average, good, really good value in the case of JSN. So, characterize it right. That's all I can say. You don't need to make things up to try to make your point better. Because, trust me, it does the exact opposite. When you try to argue the opposite way, when you try to go too far to defend your points, you end up just completely disarming your entire argument. So, when you decry these picks for being horrible reaches, for us messing up the draft like we always have, it doesn't help. It just doesn't help. Criticize the player for not being what you want him to be. Criticize JSN for being injury prone or too narrow in his use case or not having great speed. Criticize Devon Witherspoon for being a little bit on the smaller side, having shorter arms, not being as good in zone as he is in man. But you cannot tell me this is bad value. You can't not tell me these are bad picks on that level. All right. See you guys later today. We got a big day 2 coming up. I'm excited to see what happens here. I think a lot of you guys should be excited as well. And, I mean, bottom line is, regardless of how I feel about these selections, regardless how I feel about these picks, we have left ourselves some pretty serious work to do if we want this front 7 to be in ship shape for the draft. For the season. So, got to do a lot of work today to get there. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks. And I just hope I gave you guys something to think about here. The Seahawks may be making new mistakes, but they are not making the old mistakes.